Well, it's been a little while. It's been a little while since I made a video, not responding to anybody, but just, sharing some information with people. So I'm going to share today an article from Naked Capitalism, and it's pretty interesting. The title of this article is Obama wants to cut Social Security. So I want to say right off here, in case none of you people have ever watched my videos before, I'm not some sort of Obama hater or anything like that. Basically, what I view the Democratic Party as it is today, or as it happened actually several decades ago, is moving further and further to be another arm of Wall Street. And so, I left the party some time ago. It no longer represents me, and so I don't have anything, some visceral hatred for Obama as a person. What I object to is the entire system that's being propagated here. And so I'll launch right into this article. I'm going to post a link to the entire article down in the below bar so you can read the entire thing. It's pretty lengthy. And some of the later paragraphs which this author is actually articulating, I don't necessarily agree with, but the beginning paragraphs are certainly worth contemplating. So here it goes. Obama wants to cut Social Security. The headline is hardly news, at least if you've been paying attention. But this post does a pretty good job of debunking arguments against Social Security, particularly ones designed to stoke generational warfare. Along with most Republicans, many Democrats, and Wall Street, President Obama wants to cut Social Security. And here's what you need to know. What cuts are being proposed? Obama is proposing, along with the support of Republicans and many Democrats, to change how annual increases in Social Security benefits are calculated. Obama wants to switch to a different formula called chained CPI. This switch would result in a benefit cut of $230 billion over 10 years. All this is being done under the guise of strengthening the program and securing it for future generations. Right now, annual increases in Social Security benefits are calculated using changes in CPI. CPI means Consumer Price Index, which measures the price increases in various goods and services. So, chained CPI is essentially a twist on this whole thing, and in that it assumes that when the price of one good goes up, people will substitute to a cheaper good. In other words, they can find a substitute which is less expensive. For instance, if the price of steak or beef goes up, well, people will buy chicken. And while this makes sense for some things and some goods, it doesn't matter for others. For instance, if the price of natural gas goes up in your area, you can't just change your entire heating system, unless, of course, you're wealthy enough to do it. If the prices of essential prescription drugs go up and you need that drug and you can't get a generic substitute for it, well, then you simply can't afford that drug anymore. So how much would Social Security payments change under this chained CPI? At first, it doesn't really seem like a lot. Using last year's data would probably amount to approximately $3 for every 1,000 received. But the problem is that the money lost compounds over time, just like compounded interest. The changes being proposed are insidious. They are an insidious way of robbing the elderly as they grow older. What makes these proposed changes even sadder is that, according to surveys, 84% of people believe current Social Security benefits do not provide enough income for retirees. And 75% believe we should consider raising the amount of Social Security benefits. And this is 68% support an outright raise in benefits. Of course, in Washington, both sides of the aisle are hopelessly out of touch with ordinary Americans. Social Security is remarkably effective. Social Security has been a very effective program for combating poverty amongst the elderly. In 2012, approximately 9.1% of the population of the U.S. age 65 and older lived in poverty. Contrast this with a poverty rate of 21.8% for children, 18 years and under, or 13% for adults ages 18 to 64. It's also worth noting that under a new supplemental measure of poverty measures created by the U.S. Census Bureau that takes into account other sources of cash payments or benefits such as SNAP, food stamps, and tax credits, but also includes the cash cost of healthcare expenses not covered by Medicaid or Medicare, the poverty rate for seniors rises now to 16.1%. Since the government started keeping data on official poverty levels since the 1960s, the poverty rate among those 65 years and older has fallen from a high of 35%, and large increases in Social Security benefits from 1959 through the 1970s contributed to a steep drop in poverty rates amongst the elderly. Poverty rates amongst those 65 years and older continued falling, but at a more moderate pace during the 1980s and 1990s. And of course, not at all during the recent recession. While Social Security has done well to keep seniors out of abject poverty, it is grossly insufficient to meet, of course, all income needs in retirement. According to the Social Security Administration, the average retiree is receiving $1,230 a month. That's $1,230 a month, which amounts to about $14,700 a year. Unfortunately, for many seniors, this type of income is their only form of retirement. And I will put a challenge to you. Try living on that amount of income alone. It's not even income, Try living on $14,000 a year, even as a person without children, without family, just on your own. Try doing it sometime. Because I did. And it was almost impossible to make ends meet. This was a temporary situation for me, so it was nothing long-lasting. But I can assure you that it is not an easy thing to do. Now, some people will object right off here and say, listen, all these family value people, so to speak, are going to say, well, that's what families are for. Families can help out the elderly. Well, that's a really great idea, except that when two people have to make ends meet to pay the mortgage, they aren't going to have the time to take care of their elderly family members, who have long since been shoveled off to some nursing home or retirement home. And this is where most of us seniors making having to live on an income of $14,000 a year are going to end up. And then guess who else gets to pay for those people, for us elderly people in these nursing homes? That's right. You're going to be paying for it through your taxes, whether you realize it or not. So the best thing, in my opinion, is to at least keep seniors independent enough as far as possible so that they can manage on their own as long as possible, so that they can actually contribute in some way to the economy. Because after all, the necessities that they're spending their money on are part of that larger economy. This part of the larger economy doesn't just exist through people who are currently working. You have to take the entire picture into account. The economy also, the larger economy, doesn't just exist in this abstract notion of GDP. It also exists in the form of children, in the form of the disabled, in the form of the elderly, and not just simply working people. You're talking about an entire society, which incidentally Margaret Thatcher called idiotic, and she basically proclaimed, oh, well, there's no such thing as society, Oh, yeah, right. Nothing like that exists at all. So this is what we're facing here. And, us elderly people, we would like nothing better than for younger people to get the jobs, to be employed, to get full-time employment. We don't want to have to be working until age 75, just to pay the heat bill. We have absolutely nothing against young people getting good paying jobs. All we want is some basic necessities, since we've worked all of our lives as well. And we're not really asking for much here. So there shouldn't be any kind of intergenerational warfare. In fact, the longer that these corporations try to keep us on for some sort of, minimum wage, or as they're now doing in Europe, euro dollars, work for some shitty job for $1 a day while taking perfectly good jobs away from younger people, we're not at all for that. This is exactly what we don't want to happen here. So, yes, Social Security is a good program. And it doesn't just flow to the elderly. It contributes to the entire economy. Now, this, of course, was sort of ad lib. It didn't even come from the article, by the way. But it is... you need to understand what Wall Street is up to, really. Why are these cuts even being proposed in the first place? Well, first of all, if you want to do your research on this, you should really, really do your research on the Pete Peterson Foundation to start with. And this is just for starters, okay? I'm not going to be posting any links to this. I might do that later. But it is a very, very insidious propaganda campaign to start with. And let me just mention 3 words, okay? Wall Street and taxes. Let's tackle the first 2 words here. Wall Street. Now, Wall Street desperately wants to get their hands on your Social Security money so that they can manage it. If Wall Street were managing an investment portfolio of the size of the Social Security fund, then, of course, if it is a 1% fee, typically, then they stand to make $27 billion a year alone. Whether they mismanage it or not makes no difference. Wall Street desperately wants to get that money under their contract, and there are basically 2 ways to do it. Option 1 is to convince everyone that they will magically be able to grow their money beyond what you might find in the Social Security system as it stands today. Given the widespread disdain for Wall Street these days and big banks, this option perhaps has little chance of having any success in the near term. When the stock market does well, of course, it will convince some people of that possibility. In other words, of course, you can make more money through investments in Wall Street today. However, if you happen to be in the position at the age of 65 and your stock portfolio crashes to the ground, then you have nothing to count on. Absolutely nothing. And the big bankers and stockbrokers and, hedge fund managers, you can bet that they will come out ahead. And they're not going to care about your little investment portfolio that you had in their Social Security fund. You're going to be shit out of luck. Option number 2 is actually more sinister, and this is what is at work here. Basically, you simply have to break the program so that it is unappealing and appears completely dysfunctional to future beneficiaries, that is the younger generation, by declaring it insolvent in the first place. So Wall Street can make it appear not to be working at all. If these cuts, the proposed cuts that are coming, are successful, then no doubt you will hear cries of how the low-level benefits provided 10 years from now are not anywhere. They're not keeping anybody out of poverty. Well, of course they won't, because the benefits will have been cut so much back that they possibly can't. So you see, it's a very insidious way of breaking a working program and then assuring that Wall Street, in the end, gets their hands on it. So this is essentially the crux of the article. You can read it for yourself. And, the current mantra, in mainstream news as well, we have to cut some benefits in order to make these programs secure for the future. Well, let me tell you something. It's all bullshit. Privatizing social programs and social safety nets is what they're touting, and they're touting it as working. Well, all you have to do is look at Chile under Pinochet, in which these programs were privatized, and it was a complete disaster. And it wasn't just in that country, by the way. So do your own research and don't listen to these idiots who tell you that Social Security is somehow a drag on the overall economy. This all has to do with overall austerity programs across the globe. This is where this is all headed. It is essentially a race to the bottom for any ordinary citizen or working person globally. And we should not be okay with that at all.